When I went to get my driver's license a few years ago, here I am, 72, so I asked the guy who was giving the test, I said, how much problem do you have with older folks who come in and can't drive very well? And he gave what I still consider to be the classic answer. He says, well, we always like to give you old folks a break. This did not fill me with confidence that sending the person for a mandated driving test was going to fix the problem.
My solution, for what it's worth, would be that I think we should not just test the elderly, but we should pretty much test everyone even when they're 16 or 18, with some simple kind of memory test that they then perform every 5 years or so, and probably would increase the frequency as they get older. So in addition to getting your eyes checked when you get your license renewed, you did a simple little memory test that would perhaps take a couple of minutes. And if you failed that, it wouldn't mean that you couldn't drive. It would just mean that you would then have to get checked out as to why you failed this little memory test. And there are tests that have been validated. They're pretty good for that. And I like the idea of testing everyone, not just the elderly, because then it's not discriminatory in any way. I do think that it's more than reasonable to test the elderly more frequently. So while we may test people between the age of 20 and 70 every 5 or 10 years, after a certain age we should start testing more frequently, because we know the incidence of dementia increases quite dramatically with age over the age of, say, 65. And the tests themselves, are pretty easy to administer, so that even the people at the Department of Motor Vehicles who maybe aren't specifically trained in neuropsychology could be trained on how to administer 1 or 2 tests. And a simple test is the TRAILS B. That's one I think that would be useful as a widespread screening test, because it only takes a couple of minutes and it could be performed at the Department of Motor Vehicles when you go for a license renewal. The test itself is a simple connect the dots test, which is a time test, but it requires a certain amount of mental flexibility that's been well shown to correlate well with the ability to drive. And people who do poorly on that test have higher rates of crashes. So I think it would be a very useful screening test. I think that unfortunately it may take some bad event, some tragedy like what happened in California, to sort of get the forces rolling. However, I think we have done a lot of the legwork, the groundwork, so that if that happens, we know what to do, I think, to start testing people. I just think it's going to take some initiative on the part of the public to say, I know it would be inconvenient if my mom or dad couldn't drive, but it's a heck of a lot worse if they actually show up in an emergency room.